Nobody expected a single hand gesture to light up NFL conversations the way this one did. No speech, no caption, no explanation. Just a brief moment on one of the biggest stages in football that immediately had fans asking the same question: was this really just respect, or was something else being said? Because when a defensive superstar stands under the brightest lights, fresh off winning one of the league's most prestigious awards, every movement matters. And this wasn't random. It wasn't accidental. It was deliberate enough that social media caught it instantly and divided just as fast. Some fans saw it as a simple birthday nod. Others saw a quiet show of brotherhood. But a growing group believes it carried a deeper meaning, one that touched nerves the league doesn't like addressing out loud. Draft narratives, media framing, and the way young quarterbacks are labeled before they ever take a real snap. What made the moment stand out wasn't the gesture itself, it was who made it and when. Defensive leaders rarely insert themselves into quarterback storylines, especially when those quarterbacks are rookies still fighting for credibility. That's not how NFL hierarchy usually works. Veterans protect their lane, stars avoid controversy, and most players stay far away from anything that could be interpreted as taking sides. But this moment ignored all of that. Almost immediately, debate erupted. Was this a sign of internal belief the public didn't see? A subtle pushback against how a certain player had been discussed all offseason, or just a personal message that accidentally went viral at the worst possible time? And here, where it gets interesting, the gesture didn't come after a breakout performance. It didn't follow a headline-grabbing win. It came before the story was fully written, which is exactly why it unsettled people. Because in the NFL, timing is everything. And as fans started digging, replaying old interviews, resurfacing draft conversations, and re-examining locker room dynamics, one thing became clear. This wasn't a moment created for attention. It was a moment that created questions. Questions about belief, about respect, and about whether the public narrative ever matched what was happening behind closed doors. And once those questions surfaced, the conversation shifted in a way nobody expected. It lasted barely a second. No speech, no caption, no explanation, and yet it instantly became one of the most talked about moments of the entire NFL week. Myles Garrett had just accepted Defensive Player of the Year, the kind of honor that usually comes with polished thank yous, sponsor nods, and carefully rehearsed lines. Instead, he did something no one expected. He flashed a simple hand gesture, that was it. But NFL fans recognized it immediately. The perfect time sign, a signature closely associated with Shedeur Sanders, and once people saw it, there was no unseeing it. Social media caught fire almost instantly. Clips spread, screenshots followed, and suddenly a moment that wasn't explained started being dissected from every angle. Some fans called it a classy birthday nod. Others saw something more layered, a quiet show of solidarity at a time when narratives around young quarterbacks have been anything but calm. What raised eyebrows wasn't the gesture itself, it was the timing. Garrett didn't do this in a casual setting. He didn't post it quietly on social media. He did it on one of the biggest individual stages the NFL offers, a moment meant to celebrate him, and instead of keeping the spotlight narrow, he redirected attention subtly but unmistakably. That's unusual in this league. Veteran defensive stars rarely step into quarterback conversations, especially not when those quarterbacks are rookies, especially not when those rookies carry heavy media baggage, constant scrutiny, and endless debate about whether they belong. And that's why this moment landed differently. Some fans believe it was simply respect. Others think it was Garrett sending a message without saying a word, a reminder that what's said publicly doesn't always match what's seen in the locker room. Reports didn't confirm anything official, but speculation started to grow anyway. Was this support, was it belief, or was it quiet pushback against the way certain narratives had formed? What made it even more intriguing was Garrett's expression. No smile, no dramatics, just calm confidence, like he knew exactly what the gesture would spark and was comfortable letting people interpret it however they wanted. That's when the conversation shifted. Because once fans started asking why he did it, they began revisiting everything that came before it. Draft discussions, media commentary, early camp impressions, and suddenly this wasn't just about a birthday anymore. It became about respect, about timing, and about what elite players see that the outside world often misses. And that wasn't the full picture. Long before that award stage gesture, the tension around Shedeur Sanders had already been building, quietly at first, then all at once. Draft season was where things started to feel off. For months, Shedeur was talked about as a quarterback with polish, confidence, and production. Strong arm, quick processing, proven leadership. But as draft day got closer, the conversation shifted in ways that raised eyebrows. Analyst boards slid him down, mock drafts became inconsistent, and suddenly a player once discussed in early round conversations was falling further than many expected. Some fans believed it was about scheme fit, others pointed to team needs. Reports claimed front offices had questions, though few specifics were ever clearly explained, and that vagueness only fueled the noise. When Shedeur finally landed later than projected, reactions split instantly. Online debates exploded. Some argued the league got it right, others felt the drop was excessive, even disrespectful, and that's where the locker room dynamic became important. Because while the outside world debated projections and narratives, insiders were seeing something else entirely. According to people around the Browns facility, Shedeur didn't arrive frustrated, he didn't arrive entitled. He showed up early, worked late, and kept his head down. No complaints, no excuses, just urgency. That didn't go unnoticed. Veterans tend to clock rookies fast, especially quarterbacks. Body language, preparation, how they respond when reps don't go their way, and this is where Myles Garrett's perspective started to matter more than mock drafts ever could. Garrett didn't speak up immediately, he observed, watched practices, paid attention to how teammates responded to Shedeur in huddles and drills, and once he did speak, it wasn't vague. He pushed back on the idea that the draft slot defined the player. He praised the attitude, the consistency, the energy. And coming from a defensive star who has faced elite quarterbacks across the league, that carried weight. Some fans believe Garrett saw a familiar pattern, a young quarterback being judged more by narrative than performance. Others think it was simpler. He saw a teammate who earned respect the hard way. Either way, the tone inside the building didn't match the noise outside it. And that contrast only made the later gesture hit harder. Because by the time Garrett raised that hand on stage, this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment shout-out. It was the culmination of weeks of watching how a rookie handled pressure when cameras weren't rolling. And what happened next caught even more people off guard. The real shift didn't happen on social media, it happened behind closed doors. Inside the Browns facility, roles were quietly being defined. Veterans were watching, coaches were evaluating, and rookies were learning where they stood without anyone saying it out loud. Quarterback rooms are political by nature, reps are limited, patience is thin, and every mistake feels louder when you're new. But according to team observers, Shedeur didn't try to force his way into conversations. He earned them. Extra film work, staying late after walkthroughs, asking questions veterans actually respect, those details started stacking up. And slowly, the locker room began responding. Receivers trusted his timing. Linemen noticed his command in the huddle. Even defensive players, the toughest audience for any young quarterback, started acknowledging how prepared he looked when pressure came fast. That's when the dynamic shifted. Because once defensive leaders buy in, everything changes. And Myles Garrett wasn't just buying in quietly, he was signaling something bigger. Garrett's comments weren't over-the-top praise, they were specific. He talked about decision-making, ball placement, how Shedeur handled chaos. Those are things players only mention when they've seen it firsthand. Some fans believe Garrett was sending a message to the coaching staff. Others think it was directed at the media, or maybe even the league itself, that this rookie wasn't just developing, he was competing. What made it more interesting was the timing. This wasn't during a winning streak, it wasn't after a headline performance. It came during the grind, the part of the season where rookies usually fade into the background. Instead, Shedeur was earning trust. And Garrett didn't just offer support, he normalized it, joking with him in practice, keeping the energy loose, making sure pressure didn't crush confidence before it ever had a chance to grow. That kind of backing matters more than people realize. Because when a superstar defender publicly aligns himself with a rookie quarterback, it changes the temperature of the room. Coaches feel it, teammates feel it, and suddenly decisions don't happen in a vacuum anymore. That's when the conversation quietly shifted. And it led straight into a moment that caught the coaching staff completely off guard. Up to that point, the coaching approach had been careful, almost too careful. Shedeur's opportunities came in controlled doses, limited reps, specific situations, a clear emphasis on not rushing the process. Publicly, it sounded responsible. Privately, some began to question it. Because when a rookie keeps showing progress, caution can start to look like hesitation. Reports from practice hinted that Shedeur was executing the playbook cleanly. Reads were sharp, the ball came out on time, and when mistakes happened, he corrected them fast. That's usually the signal coaches look for. Yet the leaf stayed short. Some fans believed it was about protecting confidence. Others thought the staff didn't want to disrupt the existing hierarchy. And a few quietly wondered if draft position was still influencing decisions more than performance. That's when Myles Garrett stepped into unfamiliar territory. He didn't criticize the staff directly, he didn't call anyone out by name, but his comments changed tone. Instead of just praising Shedeur's attitude, he highlighted results. Wins, execution, composure when it mattered. That wasn't accidental. When a defensive leader talks about a quarterback's impact on winning, it reframes the entire debate. Suddenly, the conversation isn't about development timelines, it's about accountability. Garrett made it clear that frustration existed not just from fans, but from players who were putting their bodies on the line every snap. That honesty resonated. Some believe that moment forced internal conversations. Others think it simply validated what coaches already knew but weren't ready to act on. Either way, the narrative had cracked. Because once players sense that performance is being weighed differently behind the scenes, pressure builds fast. And that pressure didn't come from headlines. It came from the locker room. The same room that had already chosen its side. And what followed next wasn't loud or dramatic, but it changed how Shedeur was viewed moving forward. What happened next didn't come from a press conference or a viral clip. It happened behind closed doors. Inside the locker room, respect started shifting. Veterans noticed the details, how Shedeur prepared, how he owned mistakes instead of deflecting them, how he stayed steady when things didn't go his way. That matters more than highlights. Quarterbacks earn trust in layers, first with preparation, then with composure, and finally with how teammates respond when the game gets tight. Shedeur checked those boxes faster than anyone expected. Some teammates began staying late with him after practice. Extra throws, extra conversations, small moments that don't make headlines but speak volumes inside a building. And when players talk, coaches listen. This is where the rookie versus veteran dynamic usually gets messy, but something unusual happened. There wasn't division, there wasn't tension, there was alignment. The defense didn't see a project, they saw someone who gave them a chance, someone who could sustain drives, someone who didn't panic under pressure. That's a massive shift. Because once a locker room believes in a quarterback, hesitation disappears. Effort sharpens, energy changes, the entire operation feels different. Some fans believe this support accelerated decisions behind the scenes. Others think it simply confirmed what was already inevitable. Either way, the balance had tipped. And that's when the outside noise suddenly mattered a lot less. Because the most important vote had already been cast. Not by analysts, not by social media, but by the people sharing the field. And what came next made it impossible to keep things quiet any longer. That quiet belief inside the locker room didn't stay quiet for long. Because once momentum reaches the building's decision makers, everything changes. The front office saw the same thing the players did. Practice tempo picked up. Offensive meetings got sharper, fewer breakdowns, fewer mental errors, more confidence in play calling. And confidence is contagious. Coaches began adjusting how they spoke about the offense, not publicly at first. Subtle language shifts, less hedging, more certainty. That's usually the first sign something is coming. Some reports claim internal evaluations started moving faster than planned, not because of hype, but because the data matched the eye test. Efficiency in limited reps, command of protections, comfort making audibles without hesitation. That matters more than draft position ever will. Here's the part that raised eyebrows league-wide. Teams usually protect later-round quarterbacks from expectations, keep them in the background, let them develop quietly. Cleveland didn't do that. Instead, responsibilities expanded, playbook access widened, communication with veterans increased. Those are not symbolic gestures, those are trust indicators. And once those doors open, they rarely close again. Some fans believe this was a calculated gamble. Others argue the Browns had no choice once the room rallied the way it did. Either way, the timeline changed. Suddenly, this wasn't about development anymore. It was about direction. Because franchises don't pivot unless they feel pressure from inside, and the pressure wasn't loud, it was steady, consistent, impossible to dismiss. That's when the conversation quietly shifted from "when he's ready" to "how far can this go?" And once that question entered the room, the league started paying attention. The moment the Browns' internal confidence became visible, the rest of the NFL took notice. Opposing defenses started prepping differently. Media coverage shifted tone. Analysts stopped treating Shedeur like a long-term project and started framing him as an immediate variable. That distinction matters, because once the league adjusts, the pressure multiplies. Some analysts pointed out how quickly the narrative flipped. One week it was patience and development. The next it was, how do you slow him down? That doesn't happen by accident. Front offices around the league track these pivots closely. When a franchise moves faster than expected with a quarterback, it sends a signal. Either they've seen something real or they're risking everything. And that uncertainty is dangerous for opponents. Fans picked up on it too. Social media clips started circulating, not just highlights but sideline moments, communication, body language, the way teammates responded after drives. Those details fuel belief. Some fans believe this is the beginning of a longer power shift in Cleveland. Others caution that the league eventually adjusts to everyone. Both things can be true. But here's what's undeniable. Shedeur isn't being treated like a placeholder. He's being treated like someone defenses must respect. And once respect enters the equation, opportunities expand, game plans evolve, expectations rise. That's when the microscope tightens. Because the NFL doesn't wait for rookies to settle in, it challenges them immediately. And how players respond in that phase defines careers. Which brings us to the biggest question still hanging over this entire story. What makes this moment linger isn't the gesture itself, it's what the gesture represents. In a league where rookies are usually told to stay quiet, earn respect slowly, and wait their turn, this situation flipped the script. When one of the most dominant defensive players of this era publicly shows respect to a rookie quarterback, it sends a message that travels far beyond one locker room. It tells veterans that something is different. It tells coaches that the room is paying attention. And it tells the league that Cleveland may finally be operating on a new wavelength. This wasn't forced leadership, it wasn't a PR move, it wasn't scripted, it was instinctive, and those are the moments players remember. Some fans believe this is exactly how cultures change, not through speeches or slogans, but through quiet endorsements from the people who already command respect. Others argue it's too early, that the NFL has a way of humbling optimism quickly. Both sides have a point. Because belief is powerful, but expectations are heavier. Once a rookie starts receiving public support like this, the grace period shrinks, every decision is scrutinized, every mistake feels louder, the league stops waiting and starts testing. And that's where stories either fade or level up. What's interesting is how fast the conversation around Shedeur shifted, not from hype to superstardom, but from curiosity to accountability. That's the real transition, when a player is no longer just promising, but someone the team emotionally invests in. Cleveland has been here before, hope has burned them before, that history doesn't disappear overnight. But moments like this change how a room feels on Monday morning. They change how teammates respond after a stalled drive. They change how losses are handled. And sometimes, they change how long a team stays patient when things get uncomfortable. That's the part no stat sheet captures. Whether this becomes the foundation of something bigger or just a brief spark depends on what comes next, not just from Shedeur but from the organization around him. Protection, play calling, trust, timing. The NFL is ruthless with potential. It rewards readiness, not sentiment. But for the first time in a long time, Cleveland looks aligned. Star power backing youth, experience backing belief. And when that happens, the league watches differently. Because the most dangerous teams aren't always the loudest. They're the ones quietly deciding they're done being overlooked.